Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and Facebook, and soon to be TikTok at Hawk Blogger. We're here with a pregame edition of the show as I'm here down in Phoenix, getting ready to cover the game here in a few hours where the Seahawks take on the Arizona Cardinals in what will be a game that could very well decide the division title for the NFC West. And to enjoy that conversation and to enjoy, or at least, deal with our shared tension together, Jeff Simmons, real Jeff Simmons on Twitter and Blue Sky, joins us this morning. Sorry we missed you yesterday, dude, but happy to have you today.
I know. It's been a couple weeks now. It's like I don't feel balanced all right.
I'll tell you about not feeling balanced. Your buddy Evan Hill, man. You know,
Looked like I missed the night.
well, people say I'm built for this,
Yeah.
like about various things. I'm not built for drinking anymore, man. I'm just not. So, Evan decided that he was going to basically force feed me alcohol last night, and he went as far, Jeff, as to go on Twitter and request people to Venmo him money to buy me drinks.
Oh, no way.
I had to go on there like, stop sending this guy money because he doesn't. First of all, he doesn't need your money. Second of all, like, come on, dude. Like, I
People
think
must like you.
that is the nicest interpretation. Either that, or they really wanted to see how fucked up I could get. So,
Maybe that one.
it was fun. And you know who made an appearance? The one, the only Josh Cashman.
You
So
got him out.
we got him out. We got him out. It was great to see him, and we hung out for a while. And I think we might see him again at the Rams game at the end of the season. So, but it was good to see Josh. Good to see Evan, and yeah, it was a fun night. It was a fun night, but a little bit of a rough morning. I'll admit it.
I'm always impressed with the people that can just take down like large quantities of beer.
Well, see, I'm not a beer guy. I mean, I love beer, but like the volume of liquid you have to
That's it.
consume, it's like it creates a whole nother pastime, literally for the evening. And I'm generally a cocktail guy, and yeah, I mean, I've never really had problems holding my alcohol. That's not a humble brag. It's just the reality. But the thing is now, at the age I'm at, or at least my body, is I can drink. I don't get that drunk, so I don't get the fun part of it, and then I don't sleep, and you wake up feeling like crap. So
No
it's
value.
like there's
Yeah.
no value to it, other than the social part, which is, I guess, some value. So as we turn our attention to this game, before we even turned on the cameras so people could see us in our glory today, you were saying you were a little bit nervous about this game. Say more.
The Ken Walker thing does not feel good for me right now.
Yeah.
A big part of this game for me was to see how the running game could carry off some of the things we saw last week. And the Arizona defense has been really good. And so to take one of their playmakers out of the offense, that has made me pretty nervous about this game. And the stadium in general has been like horrible, horrible fortune for the Seahawks. So many things have ended here. And I'm getting nervous that this season's kind of going to end here today. But yeah, it was mostly based on, I thought it was like a 50-50 game going into it. I picked Arizona on the show on Wednesday, not because I think they're better than the Seahawks. I just figured that these teams would split. They're pretty close in a lot of areas. And the Walker thing has made me kind of think that like Arizona's definitely going to win. But this is where we're going to learn a lot about Zach Charbonnet. That's not a great feeling for a lot of people, but he has looked better in the last couple of weeks. But yeah, a lot of my nerves have been just seeing that Walker was out, and just his ability to hit big plays I thought was key in this game. And their ability to play run defense, because if they can keep throwing 8 back in coverage, begging them to run, and they can get 1 yard every time,
Mm-hmm.
ugh, I can't watch. I got a couple games like that.
All right, I gotta do something. I'm listening to you, but I also I had to check something here because I had you're not the only one that says this. Everyone says it's a cursed place. It's like it's one of the most common things that I hear, and I I have a different
Well,
perception
they
of
win a
this.
lot here,
They
but
do.
Super Bowl 49,
Yeah, I know the end. I
Cam
mean, I know it.
Chancellor and Richard Sherman's basically Seahawks careers have ended. Pete Carroll's career ended in Arizona. Russell Wilson's last game with the Seahawks was in Arizona. Quandre Diggs, I think, snapped his leg. I think Earl Thomas snapped one of the game getting carting off with the middle finger. There's just been a lot of bad things happen, but overall they have won a lot of. And they have played some of their best games here, but I'm tortured for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Sorry, I was going to do this in a quick way, but it took a little longer. Hold on 1 second. So I'm going to look up.
I'll keep talking.
You talk. Yeah.
So look, I think they're 6-0 in their last 6 games against Arizona, and like some of the best games they've had. Like Russell Wilson's last game was a really cool game where like Rashad Penny bounced it out, and they had a game in 2015 when they were like starting to come back, and that Arizona team was in first place, and the Seahawks went in and pumped them like 33-3. They have had some good moments here. That game where like Doug Baldwin made that crazy catch on the sideline.
I was there for that. Yeah.
That was one of the coolest moments, but that was also the same game Richard Sherman popped his Achilles, and I think Cam Chancellor and Cliff Averill got hurt earlier. Cam Chancellor hurt his neck, and so Earl's gotten hurt, Quandre's gotten hurt.
All right. So here we go. So I wanted to compare the Seahawks just from 2010 on the road against their NFC West opponents. So their record at San Francisco, or different places, but or different stadiums, but still away games. 8-7 since 2010. So this last win that they just got put them over 500 there. And curious if I can get. Well, it doesn't really matter. So that's in 15 games. The Seahawks record in LA or against the Rams, which would also be sometimes in St. Louis over this time period, 4-10. So they're actually really 4-10.
Holy shit!
At the Rams. That included some of those St. Louis games where there was just some bizarre losses. And then their record in Arizona, 10-3, 10-3-1, and that's away. That's an away game. And so I know I'm not blind to all the injury stuff, but I think that the accepted reality is that this is a house of horrors for the Seahawks. I'm like, I've been to a lot of games here.
Yeah.
They've all been pretty friggin' awesome. And the Seahawks, I was at the Super Bowl, by the way, as well here. And I would still call that pretty awesome. I know the ending wasn't great, but Jermaine Kearse made that catch. They had no business being in that game. Chris Matthews managed to be a threat against a Bill Belichick defense. Like, they were ahead 14 points. Like, yes, it didn't work out at the end, but it wasn't like they played like crap in that game.
No, that's an all-time game.
So, I don't know. I think the Seahawks offensively have played pretty darn well here, especially offensively. And I think that's what is going to really be key today, Jeff. Like, I don't think they can continue to walk this tightrope of we're going to give up less than 10 points a game, less than 14 points to our opponents and expect to win. I just, NFL offenses are too good. This Cardinals offense is too good to expect that.
Yeah, the Jets have kind of lived like that the last couple of years, and it's just not a sustainable way to play. You need offense in this league, and the Seahawks, some of their best playmakers and some of their highest paid players are on offense. And for them to kind of compete with the quality of teams they're going to have to play if they do want to make the playoffs, they've played a lot of like the solid second tier teams while they've been doing this, and they're playing. Arizona's in that mix again, but you got Minnesota, you got Green Bay coming up. So for them to really kind of build for this last stretch of the season, especially today, I think if they have a good offensive game, they could blow them out. But I think I need to see a lot to see that, but I think that's going to go a long way. That's why my nerves come forward about the Walker thing. But I think this is a huge step for Grubb. I think it's a huge step for the team ceiling, and I think it's a huge step for this. Was this like a month of fun, or is this actually a playoff team? And I think a lot of that will come down to whether the offense can kind of take it up and get out of this funk they've been in.
Yeah, I mean the Kenneth Walker thing was really disappointing. Like a big part of why I picked the Seahawks to win this game was because I saw I saw what I saw against the Jets and the blocking, and now I think everyone else has now seen what I saw, um, and and talked about how they found something in their duo blocking. I wrote this morning on hawkblogger.com about Ryan Grubb in general. One of the things I shared up there was an image just showing that they ran almost 90% gap blocking after being a heavy zone blocking run team all year, and they were really good at it. And so I think Setawa Lamea is part of that. I think having Oluwatimi and Abe Lucas with some more reps and understanding what they're good at was part of that. And the player that I thought was most well suited to take advantage of that was Kenneth Walker.
Yep.
And you saw it in that game. He would hit some of those creases, and it was like the Jets were lucky to keep him from going the distance. And I just kind of could see that here. I saw Beastquake 2 here, and I was like, all right, let's see the Walker version of that. I could see that happening in this game. Without him, Zach Charbonnet, he just, man, I know all our takes on him. He just has not taken advantage at all of the opportunities he's had over the last few years to start a football game and get the bulk of the carries. Maybe his best one, Jeff, would you say, was against the Dolphins this year, where he helped close that game out with some pretty good runs in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, like there hasn't been a lot of good moments. Like last year in that Panthers game where he trucked that dude and he helped close the game out. That was the best Charbonnet we've seen, and that was kind of the player that I thought we were getting from UCLA. But really this year, it's been the last couple of weeks. I thought he'd hit some good runs. There's what was it? The Cardinals game. He actually had a couple of good runs to close out that game, and there was some good runs. He hit the game-winning touchdown last week, but it just feels too many times when he comes into a drive after like a big pass, he'll come in on first down. It's 1 yard, or he'll miss a hole, or when he hits the hole, there's just no explosion there. And that's what makes Walker so exciting with the gap blocking, is because if they got those double teams going, Walker can turn those into big chunks.
Mm-hmm.
We have not seen that from Charbonnet. He can get a 6 to 7 yard gain. He's looked good in the fourth quarter at times to close out games. Like the Miami one's a good example. But just from down to down early in the game, he's just not, he never gets chunk plays. And maybe that's more of a Kenny McIntosh thing today.
Mm-hmm.
But he just seems to take the 1 or 2 yards that's there, and he just lacks explosion. He seems kind of average at everything right now. And that kind of back doesn't really work in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I will say, to counter my own statement about Kenneth Walker, if you look at the numbers last week, Zach Charbonnet was the guy that was averaging 7 yards a carry in that game. Kenneth Walker was averaging under 4. And part of it was like Kenneth Walker was in on some plays where they weren't well blocked and he took losses. Part of it is that this has always been one of the disadvantages of Kenneth Walker, and the advantages of Zach Charbonnet is Kenneth Walker will lose chunks of yardage.
Yeah.
And Zach Charbonnet generally doesn't. I wrote about this last year. His percentage of negative rushing plays compared to Kenneth Walker was much lower. And this notion that he's not explosive is actually not true until you get to like 30 plus yard runs. He actually had a higher percentage of his carries of 20-plus yard runs than Kenneth Walker last year, higher percentage of 10-plus yard runs than Kenneth Walker last year. And it's just the home run threat he is not, and he never will be. I'll tell you, Jeff, if he can be a guy that gets you a few 10 to 15 yard runs today, if he can get you a couple of swing passes, he's generally a good receiver out of the backfield. Maybe. I think it feels like hope as opposed to confidence
Yeah.
or real projection, because he just hasn't taken advantage when he's given the opportunity so far, and he just looked, to your point, very average. If they block and create the holes they were creating last week, I think even someone like him can be effective. I do wonder about the Kenny McIntosh thing. Is an interesting thing to bring up. He's a slasher. He's definitely a different running style than either of them.
Yeah.
I think he's better fit for like a zone blocking run
Yeah,
game.
he is. One cut and go.
Yeah, I'm not sure how he'll do in this situation, but it seems like we might get a chance to find out.
Yeah, they're going to need someone to spell Charbonnet at some point. So I don't know if that's Helani. I don't know if that's Helani interested me in the preseason, but I would assume McIntosh has been on the roster all year. I assume he'd be next up, but they just need someone with some more explosion out of there. And I think that's where Kenny showed in the preseason. When the holes are there, he looked pretty good. But you're right. I think the zone system is a really good fit for his style of running. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect. Every time we've wondered why isn't Kenny McIntosh getting the ball more or anything like that, two different coaching staffs have been pretty lukewarm. So
Yeah.
it's not the best sign for him, but I would guess he would be the number 2 back today.
Yeah, you get a little bit of like Marquise Blair vibes.
Yeah.
Kenny McIntosh. Like, he seems good. Why isn't he ever getting any snaps? Seems like, he might. It might be as simple, Jeff, as this is a team that just hasn't run the ball much and definitely hasn't run the ball effectively all year.
No.
And so when you're not getting a lot of reps or a lot of run snaps, there's just not much to go around. Certainly not to get to the third running back on the depth chart. But yeah, I mean, it seems like he would get a chance today. Mike McDonald talked about George Holani being, quote, potentially part of the solution. It would say a lot if Holani gets the reps and McIntosh doesn't.
That would be very much the Marquise Blair situation from a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that would be super telling of where he is. That he's Kenny McIntosh, mostly a special teams only guy. And this is just a big moment for these guys because they've been so destructive in short yardage situations. And Charbonnet's been, when they try to run through those powerful boxes up the middle, that has not come close to working. So one of the things they did a couple games ago where they had Walker run across the formation and then Charbonnet hit the other way. I thought that was pretty clever, but it's going to be all on Charbonnet today in those short yardage spots. And I'm hoping they're willing to run out of some different formations there. I'm hoping they've learned some stuff of trying to run up the middle with Charbonnet and those huge boxes is not, especially against Arizona, has been a pretty good run defense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping they really make an adjustment there.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about Arizona's defense for a second, because there's certain things that they do that are a little different than other defenses.
Oh yeah,
they run more cover zero than like I think they're the third highest rate of cover zero in the league.
Yeah.
They will run zone, a very high, like predominantly a zone coverage. Will not run much man. They will send pressure and not just send 5. Sometimes they will send 6. So they'll send 2 extra guys to make sure that they get a free rusher. And they will bring people from all positions to go after you, while also being a pretty good run defense, especially up the middle. So how would you want the Seahawks to attack this defense?
I would want them to attack them through play action. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities through play action. I think try to run the ball effectively on early downs, but that has been a real big problem. And I think the intermediate areas of the field, I don't know how much time they'll be able to get like the long developing deep routes. I think this could be a good JSN game. I think the intermediate areas of the field are very quick. Passing would be a big part of my game plan. Play action, try to run the ball. I don't think this is a game to try to run and hit those deep balls. I just don't think they're going to have the time. What makes Arizona so tricky is they run some of the most unique looks out of their defensive formations that anyone runs in the league. They don't often go 3 down linemen or 4 down linemen. They'll go 2. Sometimes they'll have these like 3-7-1 looks and like all kinds of weird looks. That was not what John Gannon was doing in Philadelphia. They were pretty vanilla defense in Philadelphia when they made the Super Bowl. And so I don't know if this is their new defensive coordinator's thinking, but it's really hard to kind of understand what they're doing in game time. So this to me is a big Geno spot. Like this is a huge Geno spot. I think we've been saying it all year. They're going to make it hard on him because when you look at their talent level, like I looked at their our lads page before the year, and like this is the worst roster I've ever seen on defense.
Yeah, it was bad.
And it's bad. And so like hats off to their coaches. Like they've really maximized what they have with creativeness and personnel and attacking differently. And even LJ Collier has started to become kind of effective. He sacked us. I think he had 2 sacks last week. And
yeah, one of them was like a
cleanup.
Yeah, it wasn't that impressive.
I know. It's just I'm like bracing myself for a Collier game, and it's like so depressing. But yeah, so I think the Seahawks have to be ready to attack them quickly because I don't think they can kind of develop the back in the pocket. You talked about the cover 0. There's going to be shots there. And so, go ahead. No, I'm just going to say that they can't sit around and have Geno scramble around and try to find something. They need to attack them decisively or else. And Minnesota struggled against them last week until like late in the game. And they were really holding that offense to because Sam Darnold's not a mobile quarterback. And he was in there and then the plays would break down pretty quick. And so Seattle didn't have a lot of success in the Seattle game against them offensively. So they're going to need to do things a little differently. Maybe the fast track helps them a little bit, but
yeah. Well, it's worth thinking about 2 things there, right? How did the Seahawks try to attack them last game? What if anything worked? And then how did the Vikings attack them this last week? And I think there's things to learn from both of those. One, we saw a lot of the attempted Jackson Smith and Jigba little tunnel screen in the first matchup. One of them worked huge. It was like a 45-yard gain, got them into the red zone, and scored their touchdown. Like, a number of them almost got intercepted. They got tipped. Arizona kind of adjusted. But the reason that is of note is because when you've got a team that blitzes and a team that plays a lot of zone, there's a chance to get a screen behind that blitz and get a lot of yards.
Yep.
And so this is a game where Ryan Grubb, is going to be tested about not just what he calls, but when he calls it.
Oh, yeah.
And do they have anything that they've learned from the last meeting and this last game against Minnesota that has given them something and Geno Smith something to look for and key on to say, okay, we've got this look. We are going to beat it with this play. That could be a key part of this offense today.
Yeah, and I'm sure the whole league is kind of, when they study Seattle now, they're going to be looking for that tunnel screen. There was a play in the Jets game last week where they set up the formation nicely. They thought they threw it, and JSN got tackled them immediately. The Jets had been studying that. They knew exactly what was coming there. So the variety of looks they're going to have to do and the way they counterpunch, you're right. This is a big spot for Grubb. There are going to be chunk plays available. There's going to be plays available to hit in the screen game. But if they're just trying to set up the same screen that everyone's seen in the last 3 weeks, it might not be effective. They didn't really get a lot of those in the Jets game last week. A lot of their chunk plays were DK plays over the top or JSN and crossing routes and things like that. So the Jets identified it pretty quick last week when they tried to set it up. I think Arizona, who probably knows the Seahawks really well, they're going to be studying that play for sure. So they're going to have to do things a little differently. And maybe that's somewhere where you've got to get DK involved in the screen game. Or maybe that's something. So they're going to have to do a little bit differently there. And it's been a really effective play for them. But that can't be all they got. They need to have some more variety of what they're going to do. And this is what Grubb was so good at Washington about. He had so many things in his quote-unquote bag. I hate the term, but this is where you want to see kind of them really dictate with their calls, not them just chasing their tail all game.
Well, and the other thing, having watched the Minnesota game as well against the Cardinals, Sam Darnold made some great throws.
He did.
I mean, he threw into some tight windows, kind of in the bucket kind of throws between 3 defenders. Like he found narrow windows against the zone. And that told me 2 things. One, like there's plays to be made. But 2, the Cardinals were playing a pretty good zone. Like these were not big gaping openings for the pass game, and there weren't busts that were showing up a lot. And so Geno can make any throw Sam Darnold can make. I have no concern about that. But it's been tough sledding, dude, to find some of these easy throws. And I don't know if this is going to be the game where you see him. I think, to your point, Geno, I think, is going to have to be like super Geno to help them move the ball today.
Yeah, and the Vikings receivers are very precise as well. And I think that makes a big difference. We haven't seen DK kind of had the same impact since he's come back from the injury. He had some good moments last week over the top, but those are typically areas he can really excel in. We haven't seen that. I'm sure they're going to be guarding Garrett Williams on JSN pretty tightly today. So he's a guy who could thrive in those spots, and Tyler Lockett kind of just looks like he's nearing the end, but we haven't seen him. He can get a couple quick plays, but I don't know if he's the guy who's setting up these quick, precise throws. We just haven't seen that from him. They don't really Noah Fant's been kind of odd, so I think this is a game where you should try to get Burner in space. I think this is a game where you can do play action, did what Arizona did with McBride. You can do a lot of that with Burner and Fant, I think, for easy, quick throws. But you're right. We haven't seen Geno on those precise, and Geno's arm is incredible. Like some of the stuff he can do off his back foot, and when he has a pocket, no one else really in the league is doing right now. But there just hasn't been a lot of plays with a pocket, and we have to see an offensive line go up against a really challenging front. So Geno's been able to do it. It's just he has to play well, I think, for the Seahawks to win today.
It's kind of funny. I mean, I'm thinking about when I watch Patrick Mahomes play and how often what stands out is these crazy off-script throws he makes, right? And when I see Patrick Mahomes do it, I'm like, dang, he's just good. Like, that guy's hard to stop. When I see Geno do it, I think, oh, man, that was a great throw. But I also think, God, man, our offense is broken. And it's funny, right? Like, Andy Reid, like, he's got the best quarterback of the generation, and he still relies on his quarterback making a good chunk of only plays that he can make kind of plays. So do you think we're too hard, or like our expectations are unrealistic about how easy the offense should look?
Probably, but I think because of the volume of the Seahawks offense and how often it looks like that,
Yeah.
it's a natural, and I think it's a fair reaction.
Yeah.
Because the Chiefs have that interior offensive line where they can run just a normal. They've really been struggling at the tackle spots. They have to sign DJ Humphries off the street, and so Mahomes has been scrambling the last month. If you've watched them, like their offense has looked a lot like the Seahawks offense, where it's just tough every week, and they saw the problem. They identified it. They signed a tackle off the street. I don't know if that's going to help, but yeah, it's certainly is not something you want to see. If you watch the best offenses in the league, they don't look like that. And so
yeah, no,
so I think it's fair, but Mahomes is just uniquely built to kind of win like that. But I think Andy Reid would tell you, like, I hate playing this level of.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you mentioned Tyler Lockett. That was the guy that I picked to have a big game, or to have a relatively big game compared to what he's been doing the first time these teams met. The Cardinals really are thin at corner. That I think Garrett Williams is their only corner that I think is particularly good.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, Lockett's had some huge games in Arizona, by the way.
Yes.
I think he had his 200-yard game here. Like, he's had some huge games. I still think people are like, yeah, he's no longer, he doesn't have it. I just don't think they've been utilizing him. I don't think that they've been able to sustain drives to move the ball to different, to distribute the ball to different players. I don't think there's anything different about Tyler in that regard. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up showing out today at all. I think if I had to guess between him and DK, I might be more likely to guess that Tyler Lockett has a big game than DK Metcalf.
Wow. Is that an injury thing, or is that just the coverage system thing, or?
It's a little bit of just a gut feel. Like, he's been quiet for a while. I think that defensive coordinators are certainly not paying a lot of attention to him the way that they are to DK Metcalf and
So
JSN.
matchup. Yeah.
And I think I have just hold him in high regard from a football IQ and from a connection with Geno perspective. And if you want a guy to be in the right place at the right time in a key moment, he's the guy. And so, that's just it's just a general. I think DK is also, who knows what he's been dealing with injury wise and
Yeah.
whatever, but he's really kind of crashed back to earth after what was a really strong start to the year where he's getting 100-yard games every week.
Yeah, he was in the top 3 in the league in receiving it. We've talked about like his kind of place in the league and where he's been, and it's unfortunate because the game he got injured, he was playing really well. That was the Atlanta, I think it was the Atlanta game he got injured.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and since then he just has not been. He's kind of looked like the DK in the Shane Waldron offense, where you see it sometimes, you don't see it sometimes. And I would guess it's injury because I don't think that suddenly just teams just studied him and he's gone. He doesn't look as like dominant in some of those routes he was really winning early in the year. They haven't been able to get him deep down the field too much. They got him 2 over the top shots last week, but one I think was hurt by wind on the ball. But he just has not kind of impacted the game the way he was early in the year. And so we're hoping he gets healthier, but I'm guessing he's pretty banged up just how he's looked. And if he can become a factor again, I think that would really help the passing game.
Yeah, gosh, how long have we been saying that over the years? I mean,
I know.
I want to talk about Satava Lamea. And you and I both felt like he had a good first game.
Yeah.
PFF had him as a really low. I've watched those snaps. He did have some really rough snaps, Jeff. Like,
Oh, for sure.
I don't think that grade, I don't think that's be my grade for how he played because I liked some of the flash plays more than I was concerned about some of the bad ones. But you brought up earlier this week, we've seen this story a little bit before where guys get in their second start and things get worse, and in their third start it gets even more bad. Do you think that's the direction it'll go today for Lamea against the Cardinals, that he'll kind of get exposed?
I think I saw enough flashes from him on like a high level that I don't know if it will go that way. I am very curious. That's something I'm probably one of the number 1 or 2 things I'm watching this game, whether he can impact the game like I thought he did last week in the second half. And I thought a lot of the big run plays came from him on gap blocks, him on duo blocks. I thought after your comments, I thought Nate Tice did an excellent kind of highlights of some of the things he was doing and just the kind of the power he showed on some of these runs. I think it's different than like Oluwatimi looking stable in pass protection or Jarrell angling a block. Like physically, he did things that no other right guard in the Seahawks. And Anthony Bradford's supposed to be this big, strong dude. And one of the things I liked about Lamea as a prospect, I just thought he looked like just a stable guard. And he would play tackle his last year at Utah, and he looked like crap. And he's not a tackle. You can see he's not a tackle.
No, he's not.
But I thought there was every reason. When they took him, I was kind of fired up. I remember. I think I wrote Rob, and Rob did not like the pick as much. And he's just like, he's not very good. He got killed at the Senior Bowl. And I'm like, I kind of like that. Like, he's the kind of flyer I would take. Like, we wanted him to double down on guards earlier. And so I liked what I saw. He did have, especially early in the game, he looked like a rookie. Like, things were moving really quickly. He was out of position. He was slow, but I think McDonald said as much. But watch that Charbonnet touchdown run. Watch the block he makes on that play. And what I liked about him is he was kind of talking. Like, I saw the All Access video. He had some kind of, like, so I don't know. This is what determines whether someone has starter upside or a backup. I talk about it all the time. The more sample size these guys get, you can tell all the time whether someone's a starter or a backup, because the backups with more games, they fall off a cliff. And that's what's been impressive about Josh Jobe this year, for example. I would have guessed he would have fallen off the cliff. And he had some rough moments last week in the Jets game. Devontae Adams torched him. But overall, I think the body work's been pretty good. Jarrell, you could tell right away. Like, he's not ready. And I don't blame him. He's a 6th-rounder from Finley. But, like, Gardner Minshew, it's like he'll come in off the bench. He'll win the game. They're like, another team will be like, I can get something out of this guy. And then when he plays 8 games, it's like, oh, he gets benched for Aiden O'Connell. And it's what always happens. So for me, this is a very interesting spot for him because I think we're going to learn a lot about him today. And I think in an offseason where they're going to need to address this interior offensive line, they need to know, like, which of these guys are worthy, or are they just all crap and do we need to upgrade 3 spots? I think these are big moments for him. Oluwatimi has kind of come back to life a little bit. I think we saw the physical limitations that you identified pretty quickly in training camp. But with Lamea, there was stuff there that I just haven't seen the other 3 guys. So I'm very curious how that rolls.
here's where I'm at with Lamea is the way I evaluate players in general is, what kind of ceiling do they show? And then secondarily, after they've shown how good they can be or like the tools that they've got, how consistent can they apply those tools? Like it's basically those two things are what I'm looking at most of the time. And I'll tell you this, Jeff, I kind of think back in my memory, I don't think I've seen better run blocking from a Seahawks guard in years.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the ceiling, like the best of what Lamea did against the Jets was better than what Damian Lewis did as a guard in run blocking. Is better than, I mean, there haven't been a lot of good guards for the Seahawks, but it was like, I mean, maybe like the DJ Fluker years where there were some times where he really would dominate somebody,
yeah.
And so I think that there's the potential here when he shows that kind of ceiling, he could wind up being the best Seahawks guard prospects that they've drafted since who? Who's the last good Seahawks guard prospect?
Probably Hutch.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Damian Lewis would be the one, but before that, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Damian Lewis, I guess.
maybe Hutch. Like, so I'm not putting all that on the kid after one game, but that's the question I have in my mind because he showed things that it's not like when Mike Jarrell played, I was not saying, oh man, he did things I haven't seen anybody do or haven't seen done for a long time. It was just like, oh, he wasn't a total disaster.
That was it. He didn't embarrass himself out there. And
so I think this is a little different. And this is a different front. There's not a Quinnen Williams across the line this week. And that there is like a Roy Lopez, who I have a ton of respect for. He's kind of like the Will Hernandez of defensive linemen. Like, no one really knows him, not, super well regarded, but just tough as nails and super good against the run. I want to see how he does in this game. It's going to be a slobber knocker like in there.
Yeah, it's not an easy front to block against. So
yeah. So I agree. I think that's maybe the thing I'm most looking forward to kind of learning from this game. What else are you kind of where else are your eyes going to be drawn? What else are you going to be trying to focus on in this game besides just the normal them winning?
Yeah, the obvious things will be can they repeat the run defense against James Conner? I don't expect them to go 8 for 7, have 0 successful plays. But yeah, I want to see how does Leonard Williams, what's he going to do again? Like, the last 2 games has been the most fun defensive line performance we've seen. And I think Byron Murphy's getting a raw deal from Seahawks fans. I think he's playing really well. And McDonald explained it well. I think he said right now the guy's not getting a lot of pass rush snaps because of Leo. He's playing nose tackle, and he's winning as a nose tackle on early downs. And he's setting up a lot of what Leo's been doing. And so if you looked at the pass rush win rates too, he's really good. So I think he's going to pop one of these weeks. I'm looking every week. But I think Byron Murphy's a guy that, sure, he doesn't look like Jared Verse right now. Like, he's not even on the board for Rookie of the Year. But I think he's getting a raw deal. I think what he's doing is really important to how they're playing the run defense. He's winning a lot in early downs. And again, so I want to see kind of what Leo does next. Like, his game against Arizona was the most dominant defensive line game I've seen from the Seahawks, maybe ever, since I've been watching. So I think
that's such a great call out because with the way Williams has been playing the last 2 weeks, there's no way the Cardinals are just like, okay, we're just going to do what we normally do.
Yeah.
Like, they absolutely have him circled. They absolutely are like, okay, we've got to figure out how to handle this guy. And Pete Carroll used to talk about creating a factor, because once you create a factor, then people have to adjust to it, and that opens up different things that you can do, right?
Yeah.
And one of the problems for the Seahawks for the last few years has been there's been no friggin' factor, dude. Like there's like these little things that they kind of do okay, but nothing to where a team's like, oh man, we have got to figure out how to handle this because it's a problem. Leonard Williams is a problem. And so for maybe the first time all year, guys like Jaron Reed, guys like Byron Murphy, guys like Dre Jones, maybe getting looks that they haven't gotten the rest of the year. And Byron Murphy, of all those guys, would be somebody that I'd be really excited to see. To your point, he had an underrated game against the Jets. He had 5 tackles. He made
Yeah.
one great diving tackle near the sideline as a nose tackle. Like, his athleticism showing up, and it wouldn't shock me if he has his big game today.
That's what I mean. He got like a pretty crappy grade, I think, from PFF, and I watched him. I was like, a nose tackle had 5 tackles, and he was that's that team can run the football. And so you're right. This could be a game where they're going to be so focused on blocking Leo because of what he did to Evan Brown in the last game. It's going to open up other opportunities. And Maffei's been a little quieter. He had a better game against the Jets. It was nice to see him kind of step up. Hall's been a little quieter, and Chenna's back. And so that's another thing I'm going to be watching. How do they allocate those snaps to Chenna? How much does he play at all? I think they're going to ease him in a little bit. But I think he just adds an element of just like toughness and fierceness that has not been there at the edge position. And nothing against Boye and Hall. I think Chenna's just like a dude. And
Well, that was my next question: is what do you think is a realistic expectation for Uchenna Nwosu today, making his return?
like 15, 17 snaps.
And what kind of impact do you think he would have?
I think he can be a really good player against the edge. I think he can make them a really tough team. I think he just makes them a tougher, more physical team, especially in the edge. And I think that's really important when you're playing Kyler and you're playing James Conner. You need to be really disciplined. They did an incredible job last time. And Boye has gotten a little better at this. Hall's taken a big jump last year. He was very bad at this. But I think Chen is the guy who can force turnovers. Like, he's a strip sack kind of player. And they just haven't sacked the quarterback a lot lately. And I think he could be a guy. He's been really productive out of that spot. And I think if they keep him fresh, they're not overplaying him. I hope he can stay healthy because I think he is their best, just most complete player on the edge right now. I think he could just round out the group really well.
You know, I think that makes perfect sense. And if you had, full go Uchenna Nwosu, I think that's exactly what I'd expect him to add. I have this concern that might be unfounded, but that he might be a liability today. Like, that his first game back, this is not even just normal game speed. This is a playoff game kind of atmosphere game. And he just hasn't had reps. And to like get thrown into this kind of thing with a guy like Kyler Murray and his agility and those other guys, I just wonder if what.
I was anxious before. Now I'm really
I'm a little worried that he's going to look a step slow out there, and it's not the game that you want a guy out there that's a step slow.
Yeah, that's you're not wrong. And that's I don't think that's unfounded. I think that's possible for sure. Another thing is he hasn't played a lot in this defense. And so they've been playing really well. The reps, the mental reps. You're right. Kyler Murray's speed, if he gets to the edge, that's a big deal. So they're going to have to manage his snaps. But again, he's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. He's been around these guys. So I'm hoping that it's just pure nervousness we're thinking about. But I think it's a good thing overall that he's going to be back in the defense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I thought the key, if there's one key to why the Seahawks beat the Cardinals the first time, I mean, most people point to the run defense, which is 100% in the running for that conversation. For me, it was the way they rushed the passer.
Oh, yeah.
The way that those 4 guys consistently collapsed the pocket without giving up rush lanes for Murray was, I mean, seriously, it was like one of the best pass rushing performances I've seen from a coordinated quartet in years, man, like for the Seahawks. It was so impressive how often they did that, and Murray just did not know what to do. I think I was listening to The Ringer. I can't remember which podcast it was, but they also talked about that Mike McDonald in the first matchup was doing something scheme-wise where he was not just disguising their coverage before the snap, but for a beat or two after the snap. And that Kyler Murray is someone who is known, like everyone makes jokes about his, not being in the playbook that much or not watching that much film. but he's kind of been a kind of vibes or a feel quarterback, instinctual. And their observation was that they thought that really messed with Kyler Murray, that he was post snap just not getting a good feel for what was going on. And I think they said his average time to throw in that game was over 4 seconds.
Wow.
I was like, what?
That's
That's
an
a
unheard
long
of
time, dude.
That's an unheard of number.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember it being like that, but that's what they said. So, I just think that was a massive factor in that game, and I'm looking forward to, like, one of the coolest parts, regardless of outcome, Jeff, is we're getting to see Mike McDonald paint like the artist that
Exactly.
he's meant to be. He's now got the tools, the ingredients he needs to go out there and create what he wants to create and adjust and play these chess games. I'm like, so far he's been winning week in, week out.
And that's the thing that makes him special. Um, if you listen to like a lot of the more what I would call the more educated football podcasts, or they were blown away with the game plan, like you said in that. And what McDonald does, and what all like both his Ravens players and all the guys who know him really well, and like McVay's even talked about this, the way he can identify weaknesses in an offensive scheme and attack it is unique. He is unique because he just doesn't have a scheme, and when things look so bad, everyone's like, "Is this guy a fraud?" But I think what he does so well is know how to attack different teams. And what they did to Kyler was unbelievable. The scheme, the plan, the execution from the players, it was a masterpiece. That's like the San Francisco game I thought was great, but I thought that was by far his best work. That's why we thought McDonald was a unique coaching candidate. With 2 weeks off from between games, this is such an interesting coaching matchup. How does the Arizona coordinator kind of react to it? How do they adjust? Evan got his name completely wrong the other day. I think he said it completely wrong.
As
And
only Evan can.
he's only I don't even remember what he said, but he's a highly regarded coach. So I don't think McDonald's going to try out the same game plan. I think they're going to have to make some adjustments. I think they're going to have to anticipate adjustments. So if you're into that kind of like the matchup within the matchup, I think this is a very interesting McDonald moment because you don't often play teams twice in 3 weeks, and they got killed the first time. Like Petzing got killed.
Yeah.
And that's what McDonald does. He can uniquely identify weaknesses in an offense and then attack them. That's what Shanahan does, and that's why he got called the McVay of defenses. That's kind of what McVay's done, the defenses for years. And now if they could come out and attack them again or differently and still have that same level of like taking Kyler Murray's run game out of the game, man, like you couldn't be more fired up with the guy we got if that happens again.
Well, think about this, Jeff. If and I haven't gone back and looked for sure, but what you kind of wonder about is when Mike McDonald has a good game against a coordinator, against another offense, the next time they play, have they adjusted, and does he get beat that time? My recollection is it's the other way, that it's been a one-way street. That once Mike McDonald figures out what you're trying to do, you don't get to do that anymore. And like we saw Mike McDaniel for the Dolphins, he got him the first time. He hasn't gotten him since.
Nope.
The Shanahan tree hasn't gotten him. Now they got him a little bit earlier this year, but I really don't think that applies because the defense was just a mess.
Yeah.
Like
That was...
so it'll be interesting, and I think there's some question as well, Jeff, about whether the offense that the Cardinals have been playing is something that people are starting to figure out. Minnesota started like understanding what they were trying to do in the run game and really kept the Cardinals from running some of their favorite run plays. So I don't know. If you had to guess, how many points do you think the Seahawks would need to score to win this game?
23?
Yeah. Yeah, for some reason, I feel like they might have to score in the mid-20s, at least for me to feel comfortable about their chances of winning today.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, this defense hasn't allowed more than 17 points in regulation to an opposing offense in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And that includes the Cardinals.
Yeah, because the Cardinals got a lot of talented players in this offense. We talked about what Kyler can do. James Conner was the big key last game, and they haven't really untapped Marvin Harrison at all this year. He's been not a bust, but he has not lived up to the hype at all. I thought he was going to be just a dominant player from the get go. And look, we saw with JSN last year that sometimes it takes time. Trey McBride's been he hasn't scored a touchdown weirdly enough, but he's been awesome. He's been an all-pro tight end for them. So he got a lot of yards last time, but they were kind of empty calorie yards. They didn't really lead to points. They were 3rd and 18, get 17 yards, things like that. So this is not an easy offense to attack. Like, they have talent everywhere. We know the limitations of the quarterback, but they are loaded with weapons. So if they come out and play great defense again today, I'm going to be pumped up.
It would be fun. We've got a super chat I should get on here before I forget. Avery Aguirre has been a member for 3 months. Thanks, Avery, for being a member. He says, last time Zach Charbonnet got a full workload, he had almost 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. He's a hard runner. I think he'll be fine. So
what game was that?
I think he is talking about the Miami game. Charbonnet had 91 yards on 18 carries, 2 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry. And he also had 4 catches for 16 yards. And yeah, that for my money was Charbonnet's best game. And he did it really kind of closing the game in the fourth quarters where he got a lot of those yardage.
Yeah, the second and third quarter were real struggles for that whole offense in that game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it started out, they scored 17 points in the first quarter, and then it was dead for a while.
They looked like a wagon, and then they looked like last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was ranking the people that this game matters the most for, outside of the results of the game, right?
Yeah.
You got to put Zach Charbonnet on that list. You got to put Ryan Grubb on that list.
Oh, well, yeah, we haven't even talked about that.
You got to put Lamea on that list. Like, those are the guys that jump out to me. Gino, yeah, for sure. Every week with him, but definitely. Yeah, I was curious. I wrote about Ryan Grubb on hawkblogger.com this morning and went through a bunch of things. Did you get a chance to read that article?
I did, and I made sure to watch his press conference on Thursday because I thought he was pretty honest and blunt about his situation this year.
I mean, I know you're in a pretty clear not a fan of Grubb place, or at least you have been.
So
yeah, where are you at?
Go ahead, ask that. So with me, it's not been not being a fan of Grubb. The areas that just popped up in my head, and I mentioned to you like all year, was the match with McDonald. It was not. Last week was really the only week where I was like out on Grubb. The short yardage stuff and the sequence. Yeah, the sequence down near the goal line just blocked me, and I was probably an emotional wreck after the game. And I was probably tweeting things that I normally wouldn't. But the thing that's always kind of been red flagged is the match with Grubb. And you can listen to McDonald talk about what he wants philosophically, and there's a lot of reports that Arthur Smith was the guy he was going to bring in, but he got hired late, and Arthur Smith took a job in Pittsburgh because he couldn't wait to see if McDonald was going to get a job. And so I always wondered, like, those two are so different in terms of, like, their plans, their schematics. So all year I've been like, I know McDonald from Michigan and Baltimore, they want to run the football. Like, that's what they want to be about. And all the successful teams in the league really right now are run-heavy offenses. And so Grubb has been the best work he's done is the passing game. And when they've tried to go more run-heavy up until last week, it's been ugly. And it hasn't worked. And I've noticed some swipes from McDonald at their approach. And then we have the whole sequence where they've been so bad at short yardage. And I've just wondered, can't get the thought in my mind that McDonald this isn't the match. And then Grubb comes out this week, and he kind of says from his side, it's been hard. Like, they haven't run the amount of plays they've wanted. And so for me, it's more about trying to make the thing, is this gonna stick? So I want to see reasons for this to stick. And I think for like what McDonald wants, the fact that they were so bad at the goal line, that clip comes out of him being like, why did you throw the ball there? It's just adding fuel to my thoughts. So I'm not like Ryan Grubb's an idiot, or like he's working uphill. They have a horrible offensive line. They don't have tight ends that can block. The running game's been a disaster, and he's had to adjust. My biggest criticism of him has been the lack of creativity in the running game and the short yardage plays. I've been on that all year. I thought they've gotten to like, this is what we do in the NFL. Let's load everyone into the box. And I thought early in the year they were doing like the fourth down quarterback sneaks well, and it seems like they've kind of lost themselves. And so that's where I've been hard on Grubb, only because I know how much that matters to Mike, and I think Mike is the guy for the long term. So that's been my philosophy. I don't think Grubb is like inept or like I can stand Shane Waldron. So like, even though Grubb's numbers are worse from an efficiency standpoint, like you wrote, like I see some of the similar issues that we've seen in the last few years. I don't think it's that different. I know like Griff has been out there and talking about how like some of the obvious things they're doing schematically, which makes them easy to kind of tells on. But I don't have an issue with like that necessarily. I have an issue with matching philosophically with the coach, how bad the run game has looked, and how hard like things like play action and creativity has been for them. But again, Grubb's done some good stuff. I don't think he's an idiot all of a sudden overnight. It hasn't kind of worked in ton of the way where we've seen play action be so effective. But like, look, I was harder on anyone about JSN. Like, I was kind of mocked in our group last year when I'm like, JSN's used horribly. This guy's really good, and he looks and he gets the ball and he gets like a 2-yard average, and I'm like, I can't keep arguing for this guy. And at the beginning of the year, it's happening again, and I'm like, oh boy, am I the idiot here? And then he comes out and he's one of the best receivers in the league, and I've been smiling about that. And some people were like, yeah, like Waldron used him great last year. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. I did not see the guy get used in the middle of the field last year. He looks like Amon-Ra St. Brown this year. Like, that's the player he looks like. That was kind of the comp I saw. And you got to give Grubb credit for that. So, again, he's not inept. He's not an idiot. I want to see him match the things that matter to the head coach. So that's what I'm watching. Can he run the football? The short yardage stuff has not just been a reflection. I've hated their play call on almost every one of these plays. Too many of them are just runs up the middle. And I hate the idea of a team that can't run block, loading up the box, asking them to have 8 defenders in the box, and then it's not working. So that's the stuff with Grubb I've not been comfortable with. I think he's had struggles with. But again, I think you painted a good case of it's not been an easy run for him. There's been a lot of challenges, and it's not a lot of offensive coordinators could just drop in and fix this problem. It's a personnel problem. So.
Well, and that's part of, the thing that it feels hypocritical to me in the evaluation I hear from a lot of folks is, like I talked about, after week 5, there were a lot of people in my mentions calling for Mike McDonald to be fired. Like,
yep.
And that he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's just Jim Mora or Brandon Staley, and like, he's not the guy. Those people are nowhere now because what happened? Mike McDonald just didn't turn around and become a different coach. They completely made over the personnel on the defense. And he also made some coaching adjustments. Both things were true. And now the defense is one of the best in the NFL. How does that not apply to Ryan Grubb, who's had zero help on the personnel side this year? If anything, he's had like degradation of personnel from injury, from, rotating offensive linemen, all this kind of stuff. And so I don't see how you can witness the first thing and not understand that it applies to the other thing here. And so I get maybe they didn't have an opportunity to make a trade or acquire.
You can't. The problem is you can't get offensive line
right
this season. Yeah,
I'm not saying even that they intentionally screwed Ryan Grubb, but
no.
The point being is he has not had a chance to remake the personnel at all based on what he's seen. And the only time you can do that really is in the offseason at this point. So is there an opportunity that if he gets an offensive line or like even one guard added that is different than what he's got now, that the offense could be different, that maybe you change out Noah Fant for someone else, that the offense could be different? I think that you could make that case. And so that doesn't mean that he's going to be back. It doesn't mean that he should be back, but I think the notion that he's a bad OC, I think is just flat, lazy analysis for the people that are doing it. And I do agree, like, the creativity's kind of waxed and waned. People you remember in Detroit when they had JSN throw the ball as a lateral across the field to Charbonnet? Like, you remember?
The Denver game.
Yeah, I mean, there were some great creative plays that he's called throughout the year, but there's also been these just oddly basic calls
That's it.
that are like, yeah, I mean, just bad. And then they're not good enough up front to do basic. They need
That's
to
it.
kind of do some other creative things. So, yeah, I think that the discourse around Ryan Grubb is, I think it's too simplistic and too emotional. And that's coming from somebody who's very emotional about football.
I was very emotional on Sunday.
But I mean, really, through the first 7 weeks of the season, this was one of the most productive offenses in a league that's not having a lot of good offense this year. And the last 5 weeks, they haven't, and they've been one of the worst. And a big part of that, Jeff, I think the biggest part of that is the run game and the inability to run the ball. So I'm hopeful that now that they found their gap blocking and maybe found a right guard that can help, that maybe if the run game gets going and they're still not a productive offense, then I think I'd have some more questions about Ryan Grubb. As it stands, no matter who the offensive coordinator would be, they'd be trying to figure out how to run the ball.
Yeah, and that's just the whole thing. The whole thing is matching the philosophy, rounding out the whole football team. And sometimes like good coordinators just don't work with certain head coaches. It doesn't mean they're bad coordinators. That's been my insight. I think other people would come on here and argue it very differently, talking about how the offense is kind of tanked, and most Seahawks fans have pretty low confidence in the offense. A lot of ways coaches are judged are how you improve over the season. Some people can start really well, but if you're trending down, that's usually a reflection of how the coaches are judged. So if they kind of end the season on this trajectory, it's going to be a hard case for Grubb, even though he has been working uphill, frankly, when you have an offensive line that can't run block. And how do you win in short yardage when you can't run block? It's really hard.
Well, the last thing I want to say there is, when's the last time the Seahawks faced a bad defense?
Atlanta?
How many points did they score in that game?
What was it, 30-something?
34. And yes, there was a defensive touchdown, but they still had a good offensive game against Atlanta. They faced good defenses playing good defense against them since. Like the Bills, even the Rams played really well in that game. The 49ers, the Cardinals.
Well, if Gino didn't throw those interceptions, the Rams game would look a lot different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great point. I mean, they had, actually, I meant to put that in the article and I forgot to, but they have
even if they had 6 points there on 2 field goals, that's 23 points. Like,
yeah, I went back and looked at that game, and they had 11 explosive passes in that game.
No, Gino pissed away that game. Yeah,
over 26% of their pass plays were explosive, which is insane. That was a season high. So, anyway, I guess you look ahead. When's the next time they play an easy defense?
the Rams.
The Rams is probably the easiest one.
The Bears, are the Bears doing well defensively?
They've been really good. I don't know if they're really good right now. I haven't looked closely.
I don't even know who's calling their defense right now. Yeah.
So, but it's certainly not going to be today. It's not going to be against Minnesota. It's not going to be against Green Bay.
No, Green Bay plays the run really well.
So, I think the flip side, people like the Cardinals offense is amazing. They're scoring all these points. Did you see who they were playing when they scored those points? Like, they were doing it against some. Like they were doing it against what was it? The Jets. They did it, I guess. But there was some other team that they did it against.
They played the Bears, but the Bears were right off that Hail Mary where Shane Waldron was at the lowest moment, and they were checked out.
Yeah. So anyway, I just I'm curious to see if, to me, it won't just be that if they play better the rest of the year, that Grubb will have proven he's not bad. If they play better the rest of the year, Grubb will have proven he's damn good. It's a not. Yeah,
this is a nod. It's crazy they're even in the playoff mix with the schedule they have coming up, because look at Arizona, who they got after this. It's a totally different line. Yeah. So if they play well against these defenses, I think that's a big, especially if you can rebound and bounce back from where they've struggled. I think that, again, trajectory, trends. I think that's a big way you evaluate coaches. If they can spike up the rest of the year, I think that's a really good sign for him.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this is so critical for him and his relationship with the head coach. And there's going to be a lot of coordinators available this offseason. So this is a really interesting period.
Yeah, make sure you check out the full story at hawkblogger.com. I've got a story up there about short yardage if you haven't seen it, where I break down a bunch of the plays and some of the patterns that we're seeing. And then I also have an article up there about Grubb and a lot of the factors that you're going to have to consider when you're making a decision about whether you keep this guy or you move on. So check that out at hawkblogger.com. Jeff, man, thank you for hopping on today, and let's hope that we have a triumphant post-game show later today. That would be fun.
That would be awesome. You know what else kind of pissed me off this week? This is a little rant that
bring it.
I usually go on. One of my favorite Seahawks figures in the last 20 years, Mike Holmgren, got named to be the finalist of the Hall of Fame. And you know what the reaction of Twitter was? It's ridiculous that Mike Shanahan did get in. Greg Rosenthal, who's like one of my favorite football guys, was like leading this charge and was like, well, Mike Shanahan beat Mike Holmgren in the Super Bowl. Like, this dude has been waiting for years to make the Hall of Fame. Like, his vote has been long overdue. Mm-hmm. Like, Dick Vermeil got in a couple years ago, and I looked up the coaching wins, the percentage. Mike Holmgren's beat him at every level. And the guy who's been waiting for years, I don't know if you heard him on with Softy, like how much this means to him. Mm-hmm. And the reaction is, well, Mike Shanahan should have got in? Shake your head. Like, that is embarrassing. Like, Mike Holmgren is one of the greatest coaches we've seen in the last 40 years of the NFL. Like, that guy is no doubt a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
If your reaction is like, well, Mike Shanahan was better. Like, Andy Reid's the best coach in the NFL. What do you think he would say about Mike Holmgren? He hired him. He identified him. If that's your reaction, you need to get a life. Like, that is pathetic behavior. I was pissed off about that. I loved Mike Holmgren, and I still do. I don't know. That's a rant out of nowhere. But
I love it, Jeff. I'm a huge Mike Holmgren guy. I'm right there with you. Luckily, I missed the reaction on Twitter that people had. So
ask Softy about it. He'll be fired up.
I will. All right, everybody. That is Jeff Simmons. Make sure you follow him over at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Give the show a like. Click subscribe if you haven't already. And make sure you follow me at Hawk Blogger on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and I think soon to be TikTok. So cheers to all of you. I will be covering the game in the press box here in a few hours. Let's hope that good things happen. Let's hope that the offense finds its footing, and let's hope that the Seahawks come out of here with a big win. It's going to be a tough one, no doubt about it. All right, everybody, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.